Hello, everyone. Welcome back. My name is Sonia. I'm Managing Director at Konverge, and today we are here with Roxroy, our Development Manager, and we are going to be talking everything to do with quality assurance on a software development project. Welcome, Roxroy.
Welcome.
Good to have you on again.
I know.
We actually tried to do this a little bit earlier for anyone who doesn't know, and we totally got cut off because of internet connection and technology. So bear with us. We hope it doesn't happen again. So we're going to restart and try to do this again. So Roxroy, why don't you start by telling us, what is the QA role in a software development process?
Okay. So the QA role is very critical in developing good software, especially if you want to create high quality functioning software that all our customers really are asking us to develop for them, whether it's a desktop application, mobile application, or a web application. So the QA role really comes down to testing, evaluating the software, whether it's a new software. Sometimes QA actually we're testing existing software just to make sure that the system works as it should work, or in order to spot issues that are somewhat intermittent. And they help to be able to identify bugs, glitches, or look at the user experience to determine, what can be changed in order to provide, a bug-free software.
Okay, great. So that's sort of like the role. Can you walk us through a little bit of the process that a QA person would have to go through on a project?
Okay, so the QA role starts just after the requirements are done. The QA role is going to need some documentation, something to tell them, what is it they're testing, what is it they're evaluating. So they will have some documentation that's done before.
And who does that documentation? The QA person or the business analyst?
The business analyst. So at Konverge, we do all our documentation in agile manner. So they won't get the full documentation, but they'll get enough documentation that will be able to give them an idea of what is it they're testing, what is it the client is looking for, and they'll be able to now think about test scenarios that they're looking for to test. So given us a feature within the system, they're looking to see what should the feature be doing, how it should work, and be able to create tests around finding defects that may crop in during development.
Okay, so can you talk to us a little bit more about like the whole testing against like test cases? I know that's something that we do a lot. Can you tell us a little bit more about what are test cases and how QA uses them for testing purposes?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so given a requirement just indicate exactly what should be built and also tells how it should be built.
Right.
QA is going to look at that document, and they'll be able to say, based on my understanding, based on what the client is looking for, how do I create a test case, which is basically a script that says this is what we're looking for and how it should work.
Right.
And they will build that. And what that means is that they now can take what is documented in words and be able to put it in a format where, as a QA analyst, you'll be able to discuss that in more at a technical or analytical way, and be able to test to see test the accuracy of the software.
So you have test cases and you have use cases. What's the difference between the two?
Okay, so use case tells you exactly how the program should function, right?
Right.
I want to be able to go to the website. I want to be able to put in my user ID and password. I want to be able to log in the system and be able to do some functionality. It tells about what features the system will be doing. That's what the use case tells. Use case also would have mockups that would also capture what the system will look like, and gives the client an idea of how the flow would be from a visual point of view. So it's more visual. The QA will take that document, and then based on that, now look at it to see, how can I now create these steps to be able to test the system, right? The test would be, you have to navigate to the website, you have to navigate to the field, type information in the field, move to the next field and type information there. It also would involve the validation rules. If it's an email address, the decision to validate that it's a valid email address. If not, provide feedback to the client. And once if it then moves to the next up, person can hit login, but more to the functionality and accuracy of the software. So that's where they do negative testing and as well as positive testing.
So my next question for you is, I know obviously Konverge, we build custom software applications for, enterprise clients, large organizations, startups, existing organizations. We build software from scratch based on the requirements that the clients have. We will take on an existing project and build on top of it, or fix or update the technology that's outdated on an existing project, update that technology, and build new things on top of it. So that's like the custom software side. And then there's the app side, so applications that are actual apps that go in the Android store and the Windows store and the Mac store. And so when you're building custom software, I can see the QA process there. What happens when you're building an app? Is it still the same thing? Do you still need QA? Like, how important is that role?
It's very similar. The real difference is just the platform and how you go about doing something. But the process pretty much remains the same. One of the things, though, is that depending on the type of platform you're using, you may have to look at different versions of the infrastructure. So for an app, if it's an Android app, different types of Android devices. Nowadays, it's a little bit easier because it's more generic. But back in the day, you'd have to test on every different hardware in order to be able to determine the accuracy of the system, because phones were not so much standardized, and there was no mechanism to be able to automate or even to create, let's say, a format that is universal across many devices. So they're very similar. The things that a lot of the tools that we have at our disposal are more geared towards web application. It is changing. I understand that, but a lot of the tools are geared towards website application. And one of the positive things, within recent times is that Internet Explorer IE, it was always one of those web browser that is important, you have to support it, but then it has so many quirks and inconsistencies that people had to create workaround just for IE, right? It's not like that anymore. But what that meant is that the QA team would have to do a lot more work in terms of testing across all these various browsers and determine if it's compatible. In recent times, a lot of browsers are kind of standardized into Chrome infrastructure, the Chromium or Chrome browser. So even IE, Internet Explorer, it's called Edge now, it's actually built on Chromium, right? And many other browsers are built on Chromium technology. So Google, although they came late to the game, they may have been the last company. They actually are in charge of determine how the web browsers function and actually set the standards.
So it's a lot easier now.
As well.
So before we had to test like on every single different platform, like Safari and
Safari,
Explorer and Chrome,
Firefox, Chrome, and
and now you're saying because technology is so advanced, we don't have to necessarily test every single one because they're pretty standardized.
Exactly right. Just a handful you have to test on. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't do testing on other ones, but just that the emphasis and your resources towards testing the other browsers is actually less and is actually more efficient now.
So question for you, what happens if you're working with an organization that hasn't updated their systems in a couple of years, which happens a lot, and let's say all of their users are still using like Windows XP, I think it was called, or one of the older versions of Windows, or how would we test against something like that?
Okay, so if there's a solution where we have already built the software and it's in that environment, what we'll do is that we'll create virtual testing scenarios or environments. So the environment actually load that version of Internet Explorer, say Internet Explorer 10, 9, it actually load that, and you QA would be able to virtually log into those systems and test, and we have to get the results. So there are ways of doing that. You need a little bit of hardware infrastructure to be able to do it, but it can be done, and we have done that before in virtual machines, VMs.
I know a couple of projects we've worked on have been very focused on software integrated with hardware. Hardware meaning we've done projects with tablets, but we've also done some projects that had medical devices attached to the software. So can you walk us through a little bit of that QA process?
Yes. So in a project like that where we have hardware, there are kind of two facets to testing. So one facet will be able to create software or testing bed where we're looking more at the functionality of the hardware, not so much how it's rendered with on a browser or how it's rendered to the user. And what the QA will be doing first is checking to see, is the hardware and the software combination, is it actually performing as it should, right? So once you have confirmed the accuracy of that part of it, then you can actually look to see, how is it now being rendered within browsers. But QA would be testing on two fronts. One would be the physical hardware, so that they know that if you press this button, this is what should happen. But they also be looking on virtualized hardware, meaning that once something is activated, what should the system do? So they're looking at two fronts, both physical as well as the logical part of it, just to see that the functionality is actually there, and secondly, that the hardware and the software actually do communicate and integrate with each other, so that we can see that the functionality or the test actually passes.
Okay. I know one thing that we've also worked on in the past before, technology is always evolving and getting better. And so are, development processes. And we've been in business for 27 years and we've changed our processes. I know that in the past we were very waterfall focused, and waterfall means, we provide a client a timeline, how long it's going to take to build that project. And then we sort of go away, we build the project, and then we only release that to QA once the entire application has been built. And then now we've switched over to a more hybrid model that consists of waterfall and agile.
Yeah.
And so we have more frequent releases being done. Can you just there is a bit of a difference in development processes between the two. Can you walk us through sort of how different that is for QA and what are the new processes that they've had to put in place to sort of follow the agile versus waterfall? And I know this is a multi-question. What happens if, a company is doing both models? Is QA like struggling to like having to develop test different ways? Like, walk us through that a little bit.
Yeah. So in the waterfall model, what would happen is that, QA will be given the system at the end of the development cycle. So they say the system is actually finished just about, yes. Excuse me?
Okay. No, I'm saying so a lot of development has been done at that point.
Yeah, we're pretty much maybe almost finished, really.
Right.
It was really towards the end. So they'll give the system, say, we're almost finished writing the system. And here is a system, here's a login, and here is a documentation, which could be hundreds of pages. At that time, QA is going to be sifting through the documentation, hundreds of pages, trying to figure out exactly what's happening, as well as testing the system. So it's quite stressful for them, because within that time frame, let's say 3 months, 4 months, they have to do all that work. Whilst the client is waiting, the developers at that time are just waiting to hear back if there are any issues. So that's more the waterfall model. In agile model, what happens is that the documentation is kind of done in parts as we are going through the system. So what it means is that development can start a lot earlier in the cycle. So rather than waiting 3-4 months before anything starts, they could start, within month 1, or month 2. And they actually start developing a system, and QA will start testing the system a lot earlier. Okay. So QA is actually testing that feature, that module of the system, rather than have to go through, hundreds of documentation.
Right.
So in this situation, QA is now able to provide feedback to the developer a lot earlier in the cycle before they move on to another sprint, right? And in many cases, systems are actually integrated, connected. So what you do in sprint 1 could affect sprint 3. If it's wrong in sprint 1, is a domino effect. It trickles down through the system. And with QA being involved early in the cycle, it does reduce development time as well as reduce defects.
Okay. So once you go through your whole software development life cycle, your QA, does that mean that when you deliver a project to a client, it's got 0 bugs and there's no issues?
Well, it's just that it will be less issues towards the end, because what's going to happen here is that as development creates a system, is tested by QA, the clients also will get a release, they'll test it as well. So we're getting feedback from the client, QA, and it goes to the developer. So there's a cycle that goes through, develop, QA, release to the client, feedback, and as a result, you actually get less issues going through the system. So towards the end of the system, there's actually less defects, and at that time, one wouldn't expect to have any serious defects. So there may be small minor issues, like I said, layout issues, minor issues, but nothing that is critical or would cause any stop within the client's operation. It would block their process. So it does help in that way as well.
So how critical is QA in the software development lifecycle?
One thing that I may not have mentioned too is that we talk about QA starting, let's say after the first sprint is finished, but QA actually gets involved a little bit earlier, meaning that the BA business analyst creates a requirement saying that this is the system the client wants, this is how it should work, and talks about the various functionality that is built in there. Now, although the BA is thorough, the BA tries to capture all scenarios. Another pair of eyes, though, can help. QA will review the document, and from a QA point of view, because the way they think about the system is not the same as the developer or the business analyst, right? There's a different perspective, right? And they are able to look at the document to say, I think, can you explain what this is about? or can you explain more on this, or this doesn't look right, or whatnot.
Right.
What that helps is that helps in having the business analyst review the document to provide clarification early in the cycle before the developers even get it and start developing. So it actually helps the developers because at that time things are a lot more clear, and it will mean that once they start developing the software, they are able to create something that is that matches what the client is looking for.
Okay. So how critical is QA on a project?
You know, it's very important to be able to involve QA early in the cycle because they provide this level of sanity check throughout the system, throughout the whole life cycle, right? From the start of the cycle, even negotiating or talking to the client, during the business requirement gathering requirements, as well as developers testing, right?
Right.
If the BA is not around, the next best person to ask is QA,
Oh,
right?
okay.
Because the QA role is one where they should really understand the system end to end, right?
Right.
And because they're thinking of the system more from an end user perspective, they are more in line with how the client would expect the system to operate and how the users should be using the system more so than anybody else, right?
Right.
Because they're acting as they're saying they put on hat, I'm one of the users of the system. What do I do? How do I use the system? What issues do I come up with? And they're the ones that actually, find that level of sanity check for the entire system. So it's really important, right? And
Right.
it's always a good investment to have to put a lot of work in getting requirements, having more than one eyes be able to vet the requirement and to have discussions around it to see is this clear enough? Is this something that does it capture the way the client expected to work, and to be able to spot issues that may come up while it's being implemented and developed for release.
Right. So one of the questions I get asked a lot when I'm putting together estimates for our clients is, why is there so much time dedicated to QA? Like, what is that? And then I get a lot of clients who ask me, like, well, can we just skip that and I'll do the QA? And I'm always like, no. And I know why, but I'm going to ask you, and I'm going to let you answer it. So can you tell us, why that's not wise? I know a lot of clients think that because they sort of have the idea and they're going to help us with the requirements and gathering it, they can test it. But I know there's a lot more that goes into testing that someone who's not a professional in that field is not going to know. So can you just walk us through what are the risks when someone says to us, I'm going to do the QA myself, and then we don't have a real QA person on it?
Yeah, well, it comes back to saying it always say time is money, right? So it's a situation where you're saying that you're going to save yourself X amount of days by not queuing it. Then the flip side is that how much time are you going to lose when your clients or your customers are not able to use the system for days or weeks or months, right? Because of
Is that what you think will happen if?
And that could happen. That could happen, right? Because if you don't test the system, you won't know or won't have the confidence in exactly what would happen on the situation. So in a case where it's a new system, there's not a lot of users, the client may say, I'm starting business, not a lot of users, therefore I can test myself. But the thing is that as the system grows and add more features and functionality to the system, then you're not sure exactly how it will operate or how it will function in certain scenarios. And if you're not a trained tester, there's certain things that you will not be looking for. You're just thinking that the person is going to lock the system and go about and do their operation. But people make mistakes, people hack the system, and in a situation like that, you want to make sure that if somebody's trying to cause harm, it happens all the time, what could possibly go wrong, right? Can they inject something into the system that could cause you to lose, a lot of time and affect your system? and QA is the one who will be able to spot those security defects and be able to indicate the accuracy of the system to say that the person is paying a credit card and they're getting a subscription for one month, right? Rather than they pay the subscription and the system thinks it's 1 year, right? If you don't test those things, then it could go unnoticed. The kind of say, oh, probably I'm just getting 11 months free because I'm a first customer.
But it's actually
yes, they end up losing revenue.
So you brought up a good point, so that I hadn't even thought about for a question. But so QA, basically what I just heard you say is that QA plays a critical role in identifying security in the software as well. Can you tell us? Can you just tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So there are quite a bit of different ways of compromising a system, right? Yeah. Let's say you have a field on a screen that allows you to accept a person's name, right? You could actually create special scripts that would allow the system to take that, convert it to a command, and do something in your database, and allow persons to be able to access your computer without you actually knowing what is happening because it wasn't tested. Right. You're just thinking that the person is entering an email address or bad email address, but not a command within the same field that could now instruct the computer to do something else. Right. And if you're not a trained tester, I mean, it also comes back to development practices as well. But if you're looking at how would someone be able to test this and think about it if they don't have the expertise or knowledge or know how to say this is something I need to test the system on, then you won't know.
Right. So this is going to be my last question. What is the difference? This is going to be a tricky one. What do you think is the difference between offshore QA and onshore QA? So when I say onshore, I mean like we're in Canada, so someone here doing QA versus offshoring, which could be Eastern Europe, India, all the different countries that allow offshoring. And I'm only asking the question because I know there's a difference, and I've had a lot of clients complain about the differences. Can you just walk us through what you think some of the challenges are between onshoring and offshoring QA?
So we talk about what QA should be, in terms of testing the accuracy of the application. Right. But it comes down to attention to detail, right? Is the QA team looking at are they making extra effort to look at every scenario? Also, do they have that level of buy-in and care and concern about the client as well, right? Right. If you do care and have concern about the client, and you pay attention to detail, you'd have high quality quality assurance than if you don't, right? But another thing too, is also has to do with how engaged is QA in the rest of the process, right? How engaged are they in not only QA but talk to developers, see exactly how the developers may implement something, reading through and understanding what requirements really mean, be able to ask questions about it, and be able to, even participate, let's say in stand-up meeting to say, this is what I did, this is what I'm going to do today, but also bring up questions about what would cause a roadblock, what would actually prevent QA from testing the system. And once that's identified, it actually provides feedback to the developer to say that although we had planned to do this is something that is even more critical because it affects not only the system, but also QA is not able to move along. So having that level of coordination, communication, collaboration does help the QA to provide better value.
But why, we have found that with QA offshore, you don't get that same quality. What do you think happens there that doesn't allow them to really produce that quality? What are some of the reasons that you think is not allowing them to
it could be that level of disconnect between them and the client. I mean, and I mean, this is just a general statement. It doesn't mean that all offshore, all onshore QA work this way. But in a situation where you don't have that level of engagement with the client, you actually don't see the client as a real a person,
Right.
then you may not have that drive to want to create that level of standard that you should be creating.
Right. So they're sort of just testing against a document, and they're not asking
more robotic
above and beyond to ask more questions and
Yes.
think of different scenarios, is what you're saying, because they're sort of disengaged from the rest.
That's correct, right? Yes, and it's more about being able to run through the number of test cases, test scenarios, rather than be able to add value question and to think about how does this feature affect other features, right? You got to think of it from a holistic point of view, because testing itself is not one bubble. Everything's connected. So what you do here, what happens here, does affect everything else, and you have to be able to have that holistic view of entire system, rather than thinking about I have to do 20 test cases today. I have to run 100 test scenarios within a week, and therefore focus more on the numbers but not the quality.
Right. I mean, we've been doing this for so long, and we've sort of ran into so many different case scenarios. But one thing that when I'm speaking to people, to clients, I'm always trying to help them understand. There's a lot of nowadays with technology. There's a lot of people out there building software. And a lot of people are doing a great job, and they're following workflows and processes. And we've sort of started this series to teach our clients and people who are looking to go through this process how to educate themselves on what is a proper process to software development, from the very beginning to execution, and what are the things that you should be looking for. So we did a series on business analysis. We've done some even on just managing a team. We're now doing QA, and I'm sure we'll get into a lot of the other roles. And our goal here is just to educate and help people understand sort of what are some of the critical things that you should be thinking about when you're building software. And we wanted to talk about QA today because we do feel QA is one of the most critical roles. And I think Roxroy did a really good job walking us through what are the things that a QA person does and how it affects each project, and if they were not on the project and doing all of those things, what would be some of the risks involved with deploying something that hasn't been thoroughly QA'd. So thank you, Roxroy. I appreciate having you on again. I'm sure we're going to have lots more of these on lots of different topics on the whole process. And thank you for watching. If anyone has any questions, you can reach out to myself or Roxroy on our social media platforms, our email, LinkedIn, everything that's out there. And you can also go to our website, which is www.konverge.com. Check us out, check out what we do, projects that we've worked on, and we look forward to next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye for now.